All right, welcome back. Powers on Sports podcast. The trade deadline, Major League Baseball, has just passed. Teams are set now for the stretch run. No more trades. The trade deadline end of July every year, and lots of interesting moves. Teams making moves, teams not making moves, and we're going to get into all that stuff and more with Chris Perez, two-time MLB All-Star, 133 career saves. Played in a lot of big games in his career, and again, former University of Miami Hurricane. So, this guy knows all about and has connections around the league still. So, Chris, welcome in, man. How's your summer going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me. We're right, being in Florida, right in the middle of the heat. So it's been fun the last couple weeks.
There you go. There you go. All right, give me an initial thought of the trade deadline. Just I know you've been involved in, you've been on many teams, obviously over the years that have made moves, maybe didn't make moves. Just what's the general player's thought of the trade deadline? Maybe a guy that knows he's not going to get traded. What's your thought if you're on a team that's in contention? Are you thinking, come on upstairs, let's go for it? Or what's normally the general thoughts of the guys in a clubhouse around this time of year?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head there. Especially if your team's close to contending, you want to kind of get that extra boost from the front office. You know, I think this year's trade deadline was kind of subdued compared to other years. I think there was a lot of little moves that were done, but I don't think anybody went out there and kind of went for it all. I think it was a seller's market, so some teams were asking for a lot in return for some of these rental players. But the teams that have been good all year kind of just added a piece here or there that they hope will help them down the playoff and when they get in the playoffs. And I think part of it was there's so many teams that are still around the wild card. Like,
Yeah.
you're only 3 or 4 games out. You can't really justify to your fan base, selling everybody. Although, me and you being in Tampa, that's exactly what the Rays did almost. They didn't sell everybody. They still kept Yandy and they kept Fairbanks, but they did make some moves, and I like them.
Right.
They have a surplus of starting pitchers that is coming back from injury. So the trade in Eflin and get something in return is smart. Arozarena, I know that was the big one. He's a big fan favorite around here, but at the same time, they kind of had this system in place. They got Arozarena in a trade. And they just made another deal for a Cardinals outfielder, so maybe he's the next Arozarena. But yeah, around the league, if you're on, like I said, if you're on the contending team, you want to get that kind of vote of confidence from the front office. Like, we're going for this. We believe in you guys. Here's another piece to help you going. If you're on the White Sox or the Marlins, I know the Marlins. I think they traded away 9 out of their 26
Right.
guys. It's unfortunately it's business, and they've been out of it for a while. So it's just like, all right, coming into the field, I'm going to do my job. I can't really worry about anybody else, and I got to try to establish myself in my career here.
Let's start with the Rays, only because I obviously we're both in the area, and I'm with you. I think if you look at what they did trading Eflin, there's no reason to be paying Zach Eflin $18 million to be the fourth or fifth starter next year. They got McClanahan, a couple guys coming back from injury. They've got a really good pitching staff. Hopefully they'll reinvest those dollars maybe in the offseason on the offensive side. The one trade that I wasn't sure, and they got to me, it sounds like they got a coup for Jason Adam, one of their setup guys. They got San Diego's like top 3 prospects. Their number one guys. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. He's a 33-year-old eighth inning setup guy. No problem trading him. The one guy you kind of wonder is Paredes. Isak Paredes. You trade him to the Cubs. You do get back a major league player in Morel. And again, you hear around the league when the Rays come calling about a guy, hang up the phone. But they seem to always are in trade talks. Your thoughts about Paredes? He's the one guy that you would think he's an all-star. Why are they trading him? They still have control over him for a couple more years.
They did, and I think part of it might be he fits and profiles really well in the Rays Stadium, and they're kind of selling him at a high. Like you said, he's an all-star, had a great year last year too. The Rays, they always seem to sell their players when at their height. I remember when they sent a couple years now ago, they sent Meadows to the Tigers. He was just coming off, a 100 RBI season, and like
Right.
you're like, all right, this guy's going to take off. He hasn't played since almost. So like they always seem to, like you said, if when the Rays come knocking, I don't know why other teams keep listening, because they seem to fleece guys every once in a while, or like the Adam trade, they get 3 for 1, right? and one of them's probably going to be like a position player, and the other two are going to be pitchers, they always seem to trade their assets and get more in return. And Morel hits a home run last night. He's
Right.
off to a good start. They know what they're doing, and I know it stinks being a fan of the Rays and seeing your guys that you grow to watch and like leave. But they've been doing this for a decade now, and I still have faith in them. And they're right there. I know they're chasing the Mariners, and they trade away one of your best players to the Mariners in Arozarena, but they always seem to figure it out.
And and say what you want. When Randy was a great fan favorite here, he wasn't re-signing here as a free agent. I know he's got one more year. He wasn't going to
Right.
re-sign here. I mean, he's got one chance to get a big payday, and it wasn't going to be here, unfortunately. So, all right,
Exactly.
let's go to the one guy that I want to get your thoughts on. To me, I knowing you, I've known you for a little while. This would not be your mentality. Ethan Crochet for the White Sox comes out publicly and says, I'm not pitching in the postseason unless I got a contract extension, yada, yada, yada. How can a guy have any respect in a clubhouse? A team want him. He's a good arm, good player. How can you respect a guy when a guy says, I'm not pitching in the postseason unless I get a contract extension? What would a guy like yours thought of a guy like him been? Those kind of comments.
I mean, it's one thing if you're like a Max Scherzer or a Verlander and you've got a decade and more of being an ace, and you're one of the top guys in the game. I know Crochet's having a great year, but it's his first year. That's why there were some hesitance in trading for him anyways, because he hasn't thrown more than 100 innings in the big leagues. So like, for him and his agent to come out and say that, I understand you might have some leverage, but this isn't the NFL. Like,
Right.
there's not holdouts, there's not holdouts in MLB. There might be in the draft, but that's once you're in the system, like, no, that's not what we do. It's a team game. If the White Sox want to, trade, it would have really made me upset, just because it's not the kind of mentality that I would want. It obviously says you're thinking more about your career and your future earnings than trying to win he might have a chance to go to a team that's contending this year.
Right.
It might be his only chance ever in the next 10 to 12 years, if he even plays that long, to compete for a World Series. And you're not being traded to like the Marlins. It's all top teams that we're talking about. And the Yankees, I think, we're up there. So like, I mean, just to kind of, shoot yourself in the foot, like, it was very disheartening to see. I took to Twitter and kind of crushed them a little bit, but like, if you're going to be a future ace of this team, if they are going to build something there in the White Sox, that's not the mentality I want. Like, it's just not. It's just selfish, and maybe it's a new era and a new type of player, but I was kind of taken aback to see that kind of demands. Like I said, it's not the NFL. You don't have as much power, to sit out as you do in the NFL personally. So like, it was just sad to see.
Yeah, I got a hard time believing he's gonna, if he ever does get traded, whether it's the offseason or next year, the respect level for him is going to be not great when he goes into that new clubhouse. Because you're right. To me, that's just a sign of a guy that doesn't want the ball in a big game. To me, if you're a big pitcher, you want the ball in a big game come playoff time. Again, he was going to go to a team like the Dodgers or the Yankees or Baltimore, somebody like that was going to be in it. They're not expecting him to throw 9 innings. I mean, this guy was going to be a 5 or 6 inning pitcher in the playoffs. Important innings, but I mean, to me, that's just
Yeah,
I'm shocked
and
that a guy would come out and publicly say that.
it is shocking. And if I'm the White Sox, I'm not happy about that either. You could just kind of tanked your whole trade value, right? Like,
Right.
there's no denying that the White Sox are terrible right now. I think they've lost 16 games in a row. One pitcher is not going to save them. So if they can trade him at the height of, he's having a great year. If you can trade him and get 3 or 4, building
Yeah.
chips for the future, well, you just kind of tank that. No team's going to trade for you, give up prospects, and then negotiate an extension just so you can pitch this year. Like, no chance. Like, it was just strange. The whole situation all around.
What do you think? What do you think Pittsburgh's going to do with Paul Skeens in September if they're still in it?
I think they're gonna let him go. I
Oh
really
yeah.
do. That all depending on if he's healthy and feeling good. But if he's still throwing bullets up there, he's a big horse. And he didn't. I think they were kind of easy with his pitches in AAA a little bit. So I mean, I know he's going to be at an all-time high in innings pitched if they get that far. But I mean, looking back though, didn't I think the Nationals shut down Strasburg
Yeah.
in one of their runs, and then they ended up winning anyways a couple years later. But I mean, who's to say, that it ended up working for them? But Strasburg got hurt anyways, and now he's out of the game. So
Dude.
my philosophy is always, like I said, you can't recreate a time in the moment with a team, and if Pittsburgh's going to get in, they're going to have to be playing good ball all the way through. Like they're outside looking in now. So if they're going to be playing playoff baseball through August and September, like and if they get in, and there's no way you can't have that horse out there. I mean, this might be your one and only shot that he's healthy. You don't know the future. Him and Jones, and they got some other guys that are, this might be their shot. So me, I'm like, use it while you have it.
Yep, I know. All right, let's get to a couple names of some guys that changed locations and give me a thought. Jazz Chisholm to the Yankees. Do you like that?
I originally didn't like it, but I mean, he's hit 4 home runs in 2 games, and if he would have gotten off to a rough start, I think it would have been more of a problem. Now that he's off to a great start, I think he fits into that clubhouse, and they accept, because he's a little out there, he's a
He's a
little,
personality,
brash.
likes to talk a little
Yeah,
bit.
if you hit 2 home runs a game, they're willing to accept the personality, right? So like if he would have gotten off to an 0-20 slump or something,
Yeah.
that personality is tired, right? It's a sideshow, and we're here to win, that kind of stuff. I mean, that home run he hit last night to put him ahead, I was actually watching live. Now it's, I know Judge is on the team and everything, but now it's kind of his clubhouse right now. You're asking Jazz what kind of music you want to listen to today, and that kind of stuff. So he's off to a great start, and like I said originally, I didn't think it would be a good fit. But I mean, when you start performing and you provide, a lot of things can be forgiven, and it's weird how your teammates kind of become your teammates if you're helping them win games right away. And if you remember the Yankees leading up to the All-Star break, they were struggling
They've
bad.
been playing
So
terrible
like,
the last month.
oh my God, you could just almost every game you could just see the pressure mounting on Boone and the bullpen. And so yeah, you get this guy in the clubhouse that hasn't he's happy to be playing in good games. He's coming from Florida, so like or I mean from Miami. So like yeah, I think it's gonna work out now. Just those 2 games. I mean, he's like, he hasn't even played in New York yet. So I mean I think they've hit a home run already, quite literally.
Yeah, and he's got some versatility. Can play third base for him where they need some
Yeah.
help and all that stuff.
Outfield.
And, yeah,
Yeah.
and he's a jolt of energy. He can steal some bases, which they don't really have. To me, he's just
Yeah.
a kind of a good energy guy. I mean, granted, he's got
The
the
talent,
personality.
the talent was never the question. It was if his personality could fit into that kind of a clubhouse and that media and that kind of, it's a circus there. It's different. That's a different animal. But I mean, like I said, off to a good start. The fans are going to be, they're going to be on his side. So I think it's going to be, looking back, maybe the biggest trade of the trade deadline.
What'd you think of the Braves going and reacquiring Soler, who was their World Series hero from a couple years back, but had just signed a big deal with San Francisco in the first year? Hadn't been playing great, but the Braves is another team, needed a jolt. They've been struggling massively
Yep.
offensively. The pitching's good, but the offense, no Acuna, Albies we don't know about. Riley and the first baseman Olson have been struggling. Soler back to Atlanta.
I think it's I mean, I didn't see the exact details if they're picking up the whole salary
Yeah, I
or
don't.
what,
Yeah,
but
that's a good question. I don't know if they're picking up the whole deal.
he's a good player, and I think sometimes San Francisco is not an easy place to play. Just weather wise, and if you're used to hitting balls out and they're now being caught at the warning track, they can start
Yep.
to wear on you. I think it's a good fit. Like you said, he played there when they won the World Series. He was the MVP of the World Series, so good memories there. And it's like a fresh start, right? Like he's not worried about playing for a contract or anything. That's already locked up. So now it's, I'm in a new situation. I've been here before. I feel comfortable. There might not be as much pressure of being the guy, like sign that big deal in San Francisco. You're the guy, right? Now you come to Atlanta and there's an Austin Riley. I know Acuna's hurt, but he's on the team, so like you can just kind of fit in and you don't have to be the guy. And then I think a big part of it too is he's back with his Latino teammates. Like that makes a
Right.
huge difference
Yeah.
for these guys, So I think it's a good move for the Braves. Like again, I didn't see the exact. I know it probably wasn't just straight up. There's probably some kind of salary details in there, but for a team that is in their window for contention, that was a pretty big move for sure.
Team like Baltimore, they made a lot. They didn't make a humongous move, but they made 4 or 5 little kind of bit piece moves. Yesterday,
Yeah.
they finalized it with Eloy Jimenez, kind of the guy with a lot of talent from the White Sox, but he's been injury prone. Maybe hasn't been as productive. What'd you think of what Baltimore did?
I think they are. I think they're just entering their window. Last year they kind of cracked it, and this year they're jumping through it.
Yeah.
And then, so I didn't think they wanted to trade away any big time prospects, and they did trade
Holiday,
away.
especially Holiday. Jackson Holiday was
Oh,
the big one.
I think they just called him up because didn't
Yeah.
Kierstead get traded, right? Or so
Yeah.
like, they have a good problem where they had too many hitters in AAA, and they used those pieces to get what they needed to kind of retool a little bit. Like, there's nothing major on Baltimore that needed to be upgraded. They have good starting pitching. Their bullpen's good. They're obviously their offense has young stars and match the ball, so they're getting ready for their run. Luckily they've been pretty healthy on the pitching front. They haven't had to go replace a big starter or anything like that. So I think, yeah, I mean, they're a tough team. There's no question their offense is gonna lead them, but every little incrementally better they can get in the bullpen or an extra starter on the mound is just gonna help them, because it's gonna be a long race with the Yankees and the Red Sox are there. So and their goal is not to win the East, it's to win the World Series. So I think they made some moves to help them out, but
Are you
nothing crazy.
are you surprised they didn't do something to fortify the ninth inning with Kimbrel?
I haven't. I know he's been struggling a little bit. I think by the time the playoffs get here, he might not be the closer. They might have that setup guy that they had last year before. Yeah, I think they might move him into the role, and then Kimbrel
Okay.
just might be a setup guy, or they'll go with the hot hand, because Kimbrel does have, he gives it up a little bit, but he's also got the experience, and especially in the
Uh-huh.
playoffs, and he's not gonna he's not gonna shy away from the situation. If he gets beat, he gets beat. But so I think, yeah, by the time the playoffs roll around, they're just gonna go with the hot hand. It might even be a starter that moves to the bullpen that gets hot. I think that's one of the shifts with analytics that we see in the playoffs is, yeah, you may have like a bona fide closer during the whole season, but once the playoffs get around, it might be a lefty that comes in that nobody can touch, that ends up pitching your biggest innings.
And and you never know, maybe they move a guy like Grayson Rodriguez to be the closer in the playoffs, a young
Right,
guy with a big arm. Maybe he's not
right.
ready to pitch 5 or 6 playoff innings, but maybe he could pitch one inning in the ninth, and you never know, something like that could happen.
Exactly, because in the playoffs, you really only need three starters. Most teams will try four, but you really only need three, especially the first round.
Right.
So yeah, those guys that are the fourth or fifth starter now get moved to the bullpen, and their stuff plays up. They're coming in only for a couple innings, so they throw a little harder. So yeah, somebody like him might be the guy that you can bring in the seventh and just let him ride. In the big games, especially with his repertoire, it's going to be a little better coming out of the bullpen.
A guy that I'd never heard of, but apparently was a huge in demand and ends up going to the Padres. Maybe I'm sure Baltimore was probably in. Tell me about this Tanner Scott kid out of Florida, 18, 19 saves, like a 120 ERA. Give me a little info on Tanner Scott.
Kind of like you said, like, there's a guy nobody's really heard of, pitching in Miami all year. Obviously, 18, 19 saves on a team that bad, that's pretty good, actually. That's more like 25, 30 on a good team.
Yep.
So, and he's a lefty. San Diego's going for it. You say what they want. I mean, every year they seem to try to make it work. They had Soto, made that big trade, and that didn't work out. But as a fan base, you can't really complain about the front office not giving you a chance to win. So I don't know what their exact plans are with him. But he's a lefty, throws hard, kind of funky. He's not over the top. And he's got the back end of the experience. So if he's pitching the seventh or the eighth or the ninth, you feel pretty good if you're San Diego. It helps you with the matchups, especially as you get closer to the playoffs. But now they're dealing with like a Yu Darvish situation over there.
Right.
So they always seem to have something kind of off the field that's happening, right? Like they can't never have just
Tatis
a
or
normal, yeah, it's
Darvish.
something. Yeah, somebody getting busted for steroids or injuries, or now it's Darvish. Like they could never just have a normal, 162 games with their roster, it seems like. But they're right there. So yeah, I think he'd be help them in the playoff time, big time, in that back end of the bullpen. I don't know who they gave up. I read they gave up 3 of their top 25 prospects to get him, maybe.
I think I
So
heard San Diego traded like 12 of their top 18 prospects in like these last 3 or 4 days, like to the Rays, to the
and
Marlins.
that's on top of what they traded when they got Soto. So like their
Yeah.
farm system's been gutted, but that's the name of the game now, though. Use your assets, and you can either try to build up your assets in the minor leagues and try to win in coming years, or you can use what you got in the minors to help who you
Yep.
have in the big leagues now. So they feel like this is their window. The Dodgers are kind of, I know they're playing ahead of them still, but they're not. I don't think they're the juggernauts that people think they are.
Right.
They're expecting a lot of guys that are hurt to come back and perform at high levels, and sometimes that doesn't work out. So The Padres may think this is their time to try to strike. The Diamondbacks are down from last year. So yeah, the Padres are, they're right there. So
And they got a lot of big money guys. They got Machado, Tatis. I mean, they got a lot of big money guys playing
yeah,
out there. Bogart,
Bogarts, yeah,
yeah. I mean, and they've been
yep.
disappointed the last couple of years. So you're right. Preller's a guy that's not afraid to make a big move and go for it. And they see an opening. I think they think that there's no dominant team in the NL. Out maybe
I
the
think so.
Phillies, but the Phillies even have their own little their warts as well.
Oh yeah, it's hard to make deep runs year after year after year in the playoffs. And the Phillies, they're playing well too. They got off to that great start, but they got some little nicks here and there. Their offense doesn't, yes, they're not as dominant as their numbers seem. And like I said, health plays a big role. They're still 2 months in the season. And one little injury to your starting staff, that could throw a whole monkey wrench in this thing. So, and I think actually leading to my next point, I think the waiver wire is going to be interesting this year. So many teams are still in it. We'll give that another month, another 5-game losing streak, another injury to your starting staff. And you're like, all right, maybe we can be sellers on the waiver wire this year. So yeah, watch the waiver wires. I think there'll be some interesting names that pop up that you'd be like, what? Like even like in St. Louis, if they go on a little losing streak, you might see like a Paul Goldschmidt go on a waiver wire, and you don't know how those things can end up to affect the playoff race.
Which of the small market, last couple questions, I'll get you out of here. Which of the small market teams, the Minnesotas, the Kansas Cities, maybe in Arizona, maybe even a Pittsburgh, which one of these small market teams do you think is sustainable, can make a run here, maybe either and get in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh's the top of the list, just because they have all the pieces more than the other teams. Minnesota's solid. Kansas City's interesting. They could have kind of been half sellers yesterday. They have 2 or 3 starting pitchers that other teams would definitely want, that aren't in their 5-year plan. They're kind of older with the Seth Lugo and stuff like that. But they kept them.
Yep.
And they won again last night. Bobby Witt's, it seems like he gets 3 hits every game now. He's hitting like 350 for the year, playing shortstop. I don't know how deep they are to make, luckily the Central is not the strongest division. But out of those 3 teams that you said, Minnesota, it always seems like it's the same team, different year. Like they always play great baseball, and they win, and they make the playoffs, and then the playoffs come, and either they're matched up with the Yankees and they can't beat them, or it just doesn't seem like they have enough front end star wise to make runs in the playoffs. So I would go with Pittsburgh. Yeah, I mean, they have a great 1-2 punch. Paul Skeens and the young guy Jones, and their
Yep.
offense. They got some young guys too that if they get them into a playoff atmosphere, they could kind of carry you. And then they got McCutchen, that's kind of the old guy that's been there, done that. And the NL Central is not the strongest division either. But yeah, I would pick Pittsburgh out of the small market.
All right, last one for you. Talk about the pressure of going from a losing situation to a winning situation. Just a guy like you pitched the 9th inning. Is there a real difference if you're pitching for Florida in the 9th inning in August in a game that is important in the 9th inning for Florida, as opposed to pitching for the Yankees or the Padres in the 9th inning in a pennant race kind of game? Talk about is there a different level of anxiety? I mean, do you do anything different as the closer when you're in that situation?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. Well, first of all, not only the expectations of the team and the organization, coming into a winning atmosphere like every day, you're expected to win. So sometimes when you're on a losing club, early in the year everybody has that mentality, but by this time of year it's just, hey, let's come to the field, let's get better, let's stay healthy, let's compete. Whereas when you're playing to win a division or get into the playoffs, it doesn't matter. It's just let's win today. Like we need to win the game today. If that's because you made a great defensive play and you went 0 for 4, that's fine. As long as we win, nobody really, winning hides a lot of warts. So yeah, you want to, and then you also want to get off to a good foot in front of your new team. Like it doesn't matter if you get traded to a non-contender. That all these young guys that are in the farm systems just got traded to the Marlins and just got traded to now's your chance to there's that pressure, and now's my chance to put on a good first impression on my new organization, right? So there's always pressure. I would say the pressure of winning, especially when you get traded from like like Jazz, like he just got traded from a last place team to New York, who's been a first place team all year. yeah, there's definitely more pressure. But you can't change your game. That's the worst thing that you can do is try to change your game. You just got to play your game and hope that you get off to a good start and have opportunities to show your team what you can do. Kind of what Jazz has done. The Yankees also had another guy make his debut, Mark Leiter Jr. from the Cubs, pitched
Yep.
last night, in an extra inning game. So yeah, you just want to get that first one out of the way, kind of like opening day, right? Like there's nerve. It doesn't matter if it's your first season or your 10th season. There's always opening day nerves because you just want to get it out of the way. You just want, okay, but I just want it to be game 10 by now, just so you can get in the flow of the season and get that first appearance. Same thing when you get traded. You just want to get it out of the way, make a good first impression on your teammates. If you can help, if you can help the team win in that first game, that's even better. Because baseball is a mental game. And believe it or not, like people, first impressions and, oh, this guy, if you get a hit your first time and you score an RBI single, now you're clutch, right? Like it just grows on itself, and that can help your confidence. So there's definitely, and then late in the game, like I said, you don't want to change anything. You just want to. There's a reason why they traded for you. Just keep doing what you're doing, and that's part of being the professional. So you just have to get used to pitching with all kinds of distractions and things going through your mind and having to perform.
All right, two more things. I just thought of this, and I got to ask you because it's what do managers when a guy gets traded to a new team, especially this time of the year, does a manager bring all the new players in front of the whole team in the locker room? How does the manager integrate these new guys, whether it's in a lighthearted way, a comedic way? How do these managers introduce these new guys to the team, or do they just let each player do their own thing? How does that work team to team?
Yeah, well, each manager's different, right? Like, so usually when you trade for a guy, if you're on the team already, you're in the middle of the season. You don't know if they're coming that day, the next day, 2 days from now. You don't know. You just show up and, oh, there's a new guy in the locker room, right? So like, I don't think I've ever had a manager like introduce somebody like, hey, here's the guy we trade. Like, I think everybody just kind of does their own thing, and you obviously go up to them and introduce
Right.
yourself and say welcome and let's get it going and that kind of thing. But yeah, everybody's different. Um, I remember in
Does the
Cleveland,
new does the new
yeah,
guy got to go buy dinner for everybody, or how
no,
does stuff
no,
work?
no. You try to want to make them as comfortable as possible, right? So like, there's obviously different guys on the team in different parts of their careers, but like somebody like Soler with a contract behind him, he's probably going to want to live in Atlanta. So like, yeah, everybody's different. I mean, you just want to make them comfortable and try to help them and their families get settled. And if there's anything I can do about housing or whatever you need, just ask. Because every club's run differently too, with just the logistics of traveling and family passes and stuff you don't not that doesn't have anything to do with baseball on the field, but it makes the guy more comfortable and try to and there's a good chance that there's already guys on the team that have played with him somewhere that know him, so that helps out too.
Last one. So when you do get traded, let's say you're a single guy, you're a young guy, 25, 24, 25 years old, you're single and you're in Miami, and all of a sudden you get the call that you're going to San Diego. Talk about
Yeah,
just the logistics you mentioned of doing that, of just the guy all of a sudden saying, shit, all my stuff's
yeah.
in Miami. How am we're on a road trip in Cleveland, and now I'm going to San Diego. How do you get the stuff from Miami to pack up the condo or pack up the apartment and just the day-to-day stuff that you need to live? How does all that stuff happen and get moved to San Diego? And does San Diego put you in a hotel? Do they put you in a condo? What do they do?
Yeah. So every situation, like Soler, let's go back to him. So he probably wasn't thinking he's getting traded this year, right? Just signed a big contract.
Right.
For his housing in San Francisco, he either bought a place in the off season or he was renting like a long-term apartment or something. It's a lot more stress for him to have to like do all that. If you're a young guy or you're just signed a 1-year deal at a place, you're probably in some kind of like corporate housing, or you're staying at a hotel. Some single guys stay at a hotel the whole year and live out of their suitcase even at home. So every situation is different. If me personally, I was with my fiance at the time when I got traded, and I was on the road. I had to leave the next day. She packed up everything and drove like to the new city.
Like
But teams,
who's physically, if you're a single guy in Florida, who's physically
yeah.
going into his apartment, packing up his stuff? Who gets
So
the
they might.
who gives him the
So
house
that.
key to do that? And I mean, when the guy's in Cleveland on a road trip, how does the house key get from Cleveland to Miami to pack up the apartment?
So that's what I'm saying. Everybody's on a different schedule. Sometimes you go back to the city yourself and do
Okay.
all that, and you get like one day to do all that, and then you're expected to be in the next city the next day. So sometimes you pack everything in one city and put it in storage, and then you just live in the hotel for the next 3 months in the new city.
Yeah.
Sometimes you put it all in a pod and it follows you around, like, so if you're like truly a single guy with nobody at home to help you out, pack out, and you didn't already live in like in a the hotel in your home city, so you can't just like say, oh, I got 2 suitcases, I'm good.
Yeah.
They would fly you back to your city that day. You pack everything up and you'd be in your new city the next day. And then when you get to the new city, they give you a week at the hotel, and then it's up to you to either keep paying the hotel or finding an
Right.
apartment, or yeah. So every team has a traveling secretary, and they all have connections in the city. They all have connections to the corporate housing.
Right.
So if you've never even heard of anybody in San Diego's front office, besides the GM and the manager, the third call is going to be to the traveling secretary, and they're going to say, "Here's your flight info. We're actually, the team's in Pittsburgh, so you're going to meet up with them in Pittsburgh. When
Right.
you get back to San Diego, we have an apartment ready for you. And then if you have a family or whatever, then you tell them, apartment's not going to work. I need a house," and they kind of do all that. So the traveling secretaries play a big role in all that kind of stuff.
Very good. All right, Chris Perez, MLB closer analyst here on the Power Zone Sports Podcast. You can find him on X and Twitter at Chris Perez MLB 54. Does a great job. Great insights on, brings you inside the clubhouse and what happens when these guys get traded and all. We'll get with Chris here as we get towards the end of the pennant race. Great insight, Chris. Appreciate the time. Have a great summer and get those kids back to school, man.
Yeah, it's less than 2 Mondays away. My daughter told me today, so it's coming. It's right around the corner. Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time on the Power Zone Sports Podcast. Appreciate you finding us. Remember, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great weekend watching the Olympics, and we'll see you next week.